Today, we're telling you everything you need to know
about the Grainfather G40 brewing system.
Grainfather is a well-established brand in the all-in-one units. This particular unit's one of their flagship, latest made units, really nicely done. We had a great time brewing on this system, so let's go over the specs.
So this system is pretty unique that it could do a minimum batch size of 3 gallons and up to 11 gallons, and obviously it's perfect for the 5-gallon as well. It could have up to 29 pounds of grain and as minimum of 7 pounds of grain, so that could determine the gravity of your beer, and it's a 220-volt system.
So let's start like we always do, from the bottom up. And the first thing you'll notice is there's no spigot. And that kind of threw me off. I like to have that spigot for a plan B situation, or things don't go well, a pump stops working, it gets clogged, whatever. Things happen in life. I run out of electricity. But without a spigot, it's kind of hard to get this liquid out of there.
You got a bottom feed into the pump that's down underneath here, and it's actually in an enclosed, so if I turn this upside down, you wouldn't be able to get access to the pump, but it's inside there. That pump flow is going to flow up through the sight glass here, which is pretty cool. All your liquid is going to come up through there, and even when you're mashing out, or even when you're chilling and going through your heat exchanger, you're going to come up through that sight glass there as well.
So yes, it is a little bit different than what we're used to. We're kind of home brewers. We're used to taking things apart. This one's pretty sealed up. You can't even see the pump on the bottom, but it's all in there. It's all integrated nicely. The sight glass itself is actually a sight glass, which is a change. Most do not have that. And it's got markings for your volume, which is pretty awesome because, to be honest, there was a point in the brews where I thought it didn't have that and there's nothing marked inside. And I said, oh my God, this thing doesn't even have any markings. And then Vito goes, check the sight glass. I'm like, wow, that makes it really easy to know in a lot of the processes. All right, so the false bottom is really unique, and it's kind of a dual seal, which is kind of cool. There's a reservoir on the bottom that this seals here, so like an awesome hop stopper and trub from coming through, and it seals really well here on the whole kettle. So you kind of have a double seal. Even if some gets past there, still can't get past here very easily. Down into the pump, out through and recirculating. Everything is machined really well and fits together well.
One of the other features I liked on the Malt pipe is, you've got the holes on the side, which is pretty standard on a lot of these units, but then where it hooks in place when you're pulling it up, there's actually holes perforated in there, so there's just more flow area, and then the cover over it kind of prevents it from leaking out and channels it downward, so you get a really good sparge with this Malt pipe.
Moving our way towards the top, the Sparge Arm. Super simple concept, but it actually works very effectively. There's a silicone piece on the side that you plug this into, and then you can aim this where you want. I just laid it simply on the grain, and it kind of makes just a nice letting in. And then you have a flow control right there at the outlet to control that speed during the sparge or mash. And then the last thing is a nice, massive, clear lid, well made, feels solid, and seals the top off nicely.
All right, moving up, we've got this control panel that's right here. It's nice, easy. It's on magnets, so you can pull it off and on. Nice bright screen, tactile buttons, but the really cool thing is it ties into the web app.
It is really well made. It rivals the quality and simplicity of the German-made Braumeister. It's intuitive, it's easy to understand, and it is almost live time. A lot of times we talk about these automations, we're like, oh, it can do this and this and this. And half the time we use them, we end up in manual mode because sometimes as a brewer, I just like to do that. This system was so easy to use that we never switched it out.
Yeah, like Chris said, I really like the interface. It's probably one of the better ones I've worked with. What I liked a lot about it too is it had brewing calculators right in on those steps. So if you had to do anything, there was calculators right there accessible. So it's a really polished app that I enjoyed working with. The other thing I really liked about it, like Chris said, you're putting in your recipe, you've got your mash steps, and then there's audible alerts for those of, hey, it's time to add this mash or this hop addition, etc.
So the last two things that one you really can't see, and that's the heating element. It's got like a huge heater. It heated fast.
It's 3,300 watts.
And worked great. Didn't trip my breaker or anything, which was awesome. And then it comes with a counterflow heat exchanger, and it worked remarkably quick. I don't use counterflows as my normal. Our tap water here in California tends to be pretty warm, especially in the summertime.
Yeah, and the instructions, they say to run some water first through it on the cooling side to get, something in there as like a thermal layer. And then, yeah, you don't want to recirculate back on itself. It's to do it in one pass and kind of knock out and cool down your wort.
But we used it and worked well.
Super efficient, yeah.
So we brewed a batch on this at my house this time. So I got the fun of kind of setting it up, playing with it the night before, getting ready, going through what features it has. Has an awesome delayed start. I was texting Vito pictures of like, hey, this interface is really well polished. Check out how nice it is. It was easy to calculate how much water. They had different ways you could do it. You could have either a sparge or no sparge, and they told you how much water to use either way, right there in the app. Super easy. And we had overall a very fast, clean, error-free brew day, which, to be honest, is kind of a rarity for us or anyone, especially using equipment for the first time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I plugged the recipe that we're working into Brewfather, some other software, and then you were plugging it in here, and you're like, hey, it's 0.1 gallons. It was really close. So it's all built into the software, and you don't have to buy brewing software. So using that Grainfather app, and we hit the efficiency right on. This thing was a breeze.
So the mash. First thing you'll see in our footage is we decided not to use a bag. We get a lot of questions about why do we use a bag, why not use a bag. I always like using a bag, but I like that false bottom in the bottom. The whole basket mash system seemed really well made. So I thought, let's give it a whirl, and I think it paid off. We really didn't have much debris down there afterwards.
Yeah, when we collected our wort, there was not much debris. I like that we're trying this approach without the bag, right? Because we're really kind of like putting it, through its paces.
One of the things, as you saw when Vito was holding it up, the mash tun is wide and shallow, which emulates what the big brewers are doing.
Yeah, that's, is worth talking about, definitely. Like with all-in-one systems, your mash tun and your boil kettle are your same, vessel. So, and there's a lot of, talk and data out there on kettle size and what it does to boil off, but not enough people talk about mash tuns and what it does to efficiency. And generally on all-in-one systems, you tend to get a little lower efficiency. We actually got 78% efficiency on this, and I think it is due to this kind of form factor.
On our first time.
On our first time, without even knowing. Yeah, exactly. We just 78% right out the box, which is pretty impressive. And I think it is, like you said, due to this form factor. You put in your mash, the timer starts. I was expecting the pump to start running.
Yes.
And we're both kind of like, oh, well, let's grab the instructions. And you'll see we kind of just run into these things without really reading the instructions thoroughly.
Always read your instructions, kids.
But then we're like, oh, you have to turn on the pump to do a recirculation. How I like to brew on all-in-one systems and even, other 3-vessel systems is a constant recirculation. So you're kind of getting your Vorloff while you're mashing.
We are like you guys, and we think everything should be that intuitive. That's the only thing I think, visually wise, that would have been nice if that was flashing or something, letting us know, hey, if you want to start, click here. Once we did, we're like, oh, cool. And I think that's the only time we were like, hey, we need to turn to the manual to get this thing going.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to do what we did. I think it, like what Chris said, it led to us getting this high efficiency that I don't know if we can get much more because we're constantly recirculating. We're getting a good rinse.
By the way, before we even dove in, it was really handy seeing how much water you should have right there in the sight glass. When you're not recirculating, it's easy to read. So we dove in, held our mash, did a mash out. We did nothing. We just sat there. It did beep at us, telling us it was doing different things. But then it started beeping at us and we knew it was time to sparge. We had another vessel, just a digiboil with some hot water pre-set up. So we lifted it up to the channel, like Vito was saying. It's really nice during the sparge. Sometimes when you have holes in the sides of these malt pipes, the liquid can come out, and sometimes it's even far enough that it comes out of the actual vessel. With the little channel covers, it was really handy to see that just kept it channeled straight down. But it was a really slow, nice fly sparge. It definitely, sometimes we've had other ones that go pretty fast, some go slower. This was just about right. It was a Goldilocks principle somewhere in there. As you're collecting, having the sight glass with the indication of how much volume, we didn't even have to pull the malt pipe out to see like, okay, we're 6.8 gallons. Okay, let's get a little bit more. You can read it so easily and start making sure you're getting the heat going. And with that huge burner, it was up at a boil almost when we were done sparging.
Another little thing that was neat in the software, you kind of like track how much water you're adding. But like you said, you could see it through the sight glass. So that was just really handy to have that visual into the kettle while we're sparging. All right, so once we got our wort ready, we went on to the boil. Like I mentioned earlier, we decided to add our bittering hop just right into the kettle. We were just gonna test it and see if we could clog it up, which we did not, spoiler alert. But the boil itself was like really vigorous. Again, I love this like smaller form factor or squattier form factor. It just had a nice rigorous boil with like 3 or 4 fissures always going. I just felt really good about the boil.
Neither one of us use a counterflow chiller on a regular basis, so we kind of had to get ready for that. But it worked out really efficiently. I was thinking we would maybe recirculate it on itself to kind of cool it and keep cooling to where we got to, but the instructions said to just do a 1 pass, so we gave it a try. We went right into our X3, and then when we plugged that into the glycol unit, it was like 78 degrees. It was amazing how cool that was with 1 pass.
You know, we got great settle and it just led to some beautifully clear wort that I was really happy with. Tasted great. That vigorous boil kind of mixed everything in. Just loved that counterflow chiller.
So during the boil, we actually heated more water in our DigiBoil that we use for the Sparge to do the cleaning with, which was great. As soon as the boil was over, transferred through the counterflow, we simply rinsed it out in place, dumped that physically out, put the water in with PBW, nice and hot, and then set it to just recirculate through the counterflow all the way back in there. And we did a closed loop, maybe 5 minutes or so at like 130, 140 degrees. Mm-hmm. It definitely cleaned it all out.
Yeah, cleaned it out. We were able to work on the sides with our scrubby brush while that's doing it. Yeah.
So it's a little bit more planning required. But overall, I mean, you got to my house right before 12 and we were done by 3:30, 3:40, something like that.
Yeah, it was just a little over 3 hour complete brew time, which is pretty impressive. And you know, I think it just goes to like the setup and the takedown of this are just really, you're shaving at least 30 minutes off that just because of the ease and not many moving parts, etc.
So the question we often get about these systems is, who is this for? The Grainfather G40 is priced a little bit less than some of the really high-end systems and a bit more than the low-end system. So it kind of sits there right in the middle. It's a nice harmony of well-made construction, but yet at a really nice price. Mash temperatures, repeatability, I think that's where this is gonna do really well. If you wanna keep repeating the same things over and over again, I think you're gonna have great success with this because you're brewing in its ecosphere and it's really well set up to do what it does. The second you're like, oh, I just wanna draw off a half gallon, now you're kind of figuring out how you're gonna do that somehow. It's okay, you'll figure it out, but it isn't for the person who's really trying to explore different things they could possibly do with it.
It allows you to focus on recipe and ingredients, right? And takes out the other variables. You know, inevitably when people are brewing, especially if you're building a Franken system, you're always adding something and it's changing your efficiency and things like that. This locks you in. You're gonna get repeatability right from the get-go. So you can focus in on recipe and just making the beer side of things.
So if you're looking for something that is gonna be repeatable over and over again, make great beer over and over again, and is really well made and has a killer interface, then this is the unit for you.
All right, you can find everything about the Grainfather G40 at morebeer.com, and there's links below in the description.